Welcome to the Show Me the Way podcast. I am your host, Andrea Miller, alongside a dear, dear friend, Tammy Thompson, and we are so excited to bring this podcast to you. Show Me the Way podcast is a podcast dedicated to exploring the journeys of those who have faced adversity and found themselves on unexpected paths. We will have meaningful, thoughtful conversations about challenges we have faced and how we discovered and forged new direction. Prepare to be inspired and to uncover your own strength as you listen to relatable and motivating stories. Life has a way of twisting and turning, and we often need a fresh perspective to understand how to navigate. Let's show each other the way. This week, we had the pleasure of welcoming a longtime friend of mine, Lora Nortley, to the podcast. Lora and I first met at my very first job out of college, where we formed a strong friendship. After learning about the podcast, Lora felt compelled to be a guest, and we decided to focus on a deeply impactful topic, her journey through COVID and its aftermath. Lora contracted the virus in early 2021, and her experience was extremely difficult and scary. She was in the hospital for a long period of time and has since dealt with the lingering effects of long COVID. In our conversation, she opens up about the trauma of her hospitalization, the physical and emotional challenges of rehabilitation, and her path toward regaining a sense of normalcy. Lora emphasizes the importance of self-advocacy and listening to your body and mind when navigating any medical treatment. In addition to her health journey, Lora shares a personal and inspiring story about her marriage. She reflects on the difficulties she and her husband faced prior to COVID and how going through such a life-altering experience together ultimately strengthened their bond. Her husband's support during her recovery was a testament to their resilience as a couple. Laura's determination, strength, and her insights shine throughout our conversation. Her story is not only moving, but also a reminder of the power of perseverance and self-care. I know her experiences will resonate deeply with all of you, and you'll love her outlook of dancing through life. Welcome back to the Show Me the Way podcast. So happy to welcome Lora Nortley to the show. I love having people on the show who I have known for a long time and who I've shared and experienced so much with. Lora and I worked together in two different departments at my very first company right out of college, Campbell & Company. We took trips, we traveled in a caravan across the country, we worked events, we enjoyed a great work friendship. Fortunately, we've been able to stay in touch with one another mainly through Facebook or when we see each other. And then when we do catch up, it's like no time has passed, which is so nice. And Lora reached out to talk about my podcast, and I was so excited. And I really wanted her to be part of it because, like I always say, we all have stories. So I'm so glad you're here, Lora.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Good.
I was not right out of college when we met.
Right. I was right. I was a little kid. Remember they used to call me Baby Andrea? Yeah. Back in
Yep.
the day.
I do remember, and yes, we did have lots of fun times, lots of work challenges. But I'm happy that I've had the opportunity to know you and to work with you, and love keeping in touch, even if it's just through Facebook.
Yes, I
Um,
agree.
And I have lots of stories, but I've picked just a few that I want to share. And one story, just because I know Andrea likes this story and everybody seems to get a kick out of it. So a little bit of background on me. I grew up out in the country, actually on a farm. We had a goat dairy, which was unusual. I had two brothers, two sisters. And the story I want to get to is meeting my husband. I was 10 years old and riding the school bus on my way to school. And this very charismatic looking young man got on the bus with a gorgeous smile and bright blue eyes. And I turned to my friend at the time and I said, I'm going to marry him. And we started hanging out. He was the first boy I ever kissed, the first boy I ever went on a date with. And when I was 19, we got married. There was a few years where we didn't see each other. We went to the same high school. There was only about 400, 500 kids in the high school. So we saw each other every day, but we didn't speak. We had broken up because my dad didn't like him. His mom didn't like me. Just too many challenges. So we kind of took a break, but we're drawn back together again and started dating. And after 4.5 years, we decided our parents can't keep us apart if we're married. So we said, let's do it. Let's get married. That was in 1986. So what are we at? Like 38 years, I think. We just celebrated in December. So certainly not without its challenges. Any relationship, whether it's a marriage or friends, goes through some challenges. And we have certainly had our fair share of disagreements or times where we're not happy with each other or just need time apart or whatever. My most challenging experience in my life was I had severe COVID. At the time, my husband and I weren't great, being that he owns his own elevator company. It was considered essential business, so he continued to work, was out and about in public places, fixing elevators, doing maintenance, whatever. He was really trying to stay on top of what was happening with COVID, what were the regulations, what was required. So he had some extra stress in his life at the time. And I was working from home. And the work that I was doing at the time, there wasn't a lot of interaction with other people. I basically sat at my computer and worked 8, 9 hours a day. And probably twice a week, I would have Zoom meetings of some sort. So that was really the only interaction I was having with the outside world. That was where it kind of reached the peak where I decided I need to do something different, and was doing a lot of praying. And do I stay? Do I go? I was starting to look at options on where would I go? What would I do? What was that going to look like? And I just kept praying for a sign. God, show me what I need to do. Where do I need to be? Where am I going? What's the right decision? And I wasn't hearing an answer. So I just kept looking, trying to figure out what was I going to do next. And then I got sick. At first, I just thought it was the flu. I felt tired and achy and sore throat and sniffles. And I thought, certainly this isn't COVID. It would be worse than this. And that went on for about 5 days. I should have known sooner because I was taking naps at my lunch break. And that's not anything I've ever done before. But Friday night, I sweated like crazy. And I thought, okay, I've beat this flu. Woke up in the middle of the night. I felt great. I had energy. I stripped the bed, put on new sheets, started a load of laundry, got a shower, went back to bed. Woke up in the morning and it started all over again. I thought, this is not the flu. So I was able to get an appointment at a clinic to go in and get tested. They did the nasal swab and came back and said, you need to go to the emergency room immediately. My oxygen level was in the 70s. I had 103 temperature, but I hadn't seen my husband that day. And I said, I'm not going directly to the hospital. So I went home, texted my husband, told him, I've got COVID. I need you to take me to the hospital, meet me at the house. And he took me to the emergency room, and they asked him, why are you still here? And he said, I'm here with my wife. And they said, if you're not sick, you need to leave now. And that was scary in itself. So I spent a few hours in the emergency room where they were monitoring my heart. And they kept asking me, do you feel like you're having a heart attack? I'm like, I've not had a heart attack before. I don't know. I said, my chest doesn't hurt, but apparently my heart rate was severely elevated. And so they were very concerned about that. This was in the evening when I first got there. It was probably close to midnight when they finally admitted me and took me to a COVID floor. So I was in a regular hospital room. I was on oxygen, but I could get up and go use the bathroom and make myself comfortable and whatever. When they first checked me in, they said, well, we think that 3, 4, maybe 5 days on oxygen, and we'll be able to send you home. So that was my mindset. Okay, this isn't going to be too bad. But every day I just kept getting worse. And I think it was on the 3rd or 4th day that I was there that I must have passed out, because the next thing I know, they're wheeling me down the hallway into an elevator. When, I kind of figured out that I wasn't in my room anymore. And they said, we're taking you to the ICU. They have higher levels of oxygen available. So got to ICU, and a couple doctors and a couple nurses came in. Once they got me all situated, they said, we want to put you on a ventilator. You're not getting enough oxygen. If there's somebody you need to call, you need to do that now. And I looked at them, and I looked at the doctor that was speaking, and he didn't look confident to me. And I said, no. And they said, what do you mean, no? I said, you're not putting me on a ventilator. And he said, but you're not getting enough oxygen. And I said, I've been telling you for 2 days, my sinuses are congested. My sinuses are inflamed. I have a deviated septum. You're only giving me oxygen through my nose. I can't breathe through my nose. I need you to give me one that goes over your mouth so you can breathe through your mouth. And they said, okay, we can do that. So at that point, I had both the nasal cannula and the over your face oxygen. And both of those sources were at 50 liters a minute, which is the highest they can set it. The first night, maybe the first 2 nights in ICU, all I did was watch the clock. And every second, I just tried to take a breath, try to take a breath. I was so afraid that if I fell asleep, that they would put me on a ventilator. The whole time I was in the ICU, I never laid down completely. It was just easier to breathe being upright. I barely slept. The ICU, there's always lights on, there's always activity happening. So I really didn't sleep much, which when I was at my worst, I was okay with that because I really felt like if I fell asleep, they would put me on a ventilator. And I knew that if I went on a ventilator, I would die. No visitors, of course. The only people you see are the nurses. The thing that I am most grateful for is that I was cognizant enough to advocate for myself. So many people that went in the hospital weren't or didn't,
Right.
and I questioned everything. They would come in with a handful of pills, and I would want to know, what are each of these? Why are you giving them to me? And there's some that I just refuse to take. The food in the hospital is so awful. It's not good for you. They kept bringing me Ensure because you're not getting enough nutrition. I'm like, I'm laying in a bed. I don't need a lot of calories. I'm reading the labels on the Ensure and I'm like, I am not drinking this. And this is not good for you. It's mostly sugar. And they would bring me yogurt and ice cream and all these dairy products that they were wanting me to consume. And I said, I'm not eating any of this. Well, why? I said, well, because the dairy makes me more congested. And the nurse said, oh, that's just a myth. So then another nurse put on my chart that I was lactose intolerant so that they would then send me the fruit juice Ensure, which is really still just sugar water. So I refused that too. One of the nurses asked me, so what do you want? I said, I want chicken broth, beef broth, chicken noodle soup. She said, well, what about for breakfast? Chicken broth, beef broth, chicken noodle soup. For breakfast? I said, what difference does it make what time I eat it? I mean, I'm in a hospital room. I can hardly tell what time of day it is anyway. It doesn't matter. So that's what they brought me. That was really what I ate for about 4 or 5 days. And it did make a difference for me. I spent a total of 4 weeks in the ICU. The first 2 weeks, a week and a half, maybe were the roughest, where I wasn't sure if I was going to make it or not. And not being able to, even to send text messages, it took so much focus and concentration that I would hold my breath without realizing it, just to send a text message. Then my numbers would go down and the alarms would go off. And because was still within certain days of testing positive for COVID, if anybody were to come in my room, they'd have to go in the outer room first and get all garbed up and then come in, with all of their um, astronaut looking.
Protective equipment, yes.
Right, yeah. So they would just come in the ICU. It's all glass, big sliding doors, and they would just come and bang on the door. Breathe, breathe, breathe. And that happened several times. There was one night where somebody came in to check the oxygen, and she did something. I couldn't quite see what it was because it was kind of just over my right shoulder. And as she's going to leave, I said, "Wait a minute, something's not right." She said, "But I didn't do anything." I said, "I just watched you. The oxygen isn't flowing anymore." "Well, I didn't do anything." And she left. So sure enough, within about 30 seconds, the alarms are going off, the lights are flashing, and nurses are rushing in. Said that somebody from pulmonology was here. They did something over here. Something isn't right. So they fixed that. Another thing that happened with all of the medical shortages, when you're on the high flow oxygen, they use sterilized water that kind of drips into the air hose and moisturizes the water because otherwise it just completely dries out your sinuses. And usually that comes in a bag, like a saline type bag. Well, with all of the shortages, they were also getting this water in a plastic half-gallon size bottle. And so they started using some of those, and the water would stop dripping out because it's creating suction in the bottle. Just like if you're trying to dump ketchup out of a bottle, you turn it completely upside down. Eventually, you don't get anything because it's just created that suction. So it's the same thing. So I told them, don't use those on me anymore. I want only the plastic bag type. So I really had to advocate a lot for myself. So, and I'm thinking about, what if somebody were on a ventilator
Hmm.
and they couldn't speak up and say, hey, this isn't right? How many people died because of that? Because somebody did something wrong that wasn't necessarily a huge deal, but it was enough that somebody couldn't speak up for themselves, and then now they're gone.
Right.
So
And that was one of the main reasons that you and I talked about sharing the story. Laura had said, I want to talk about something that's going to be impactful for your listeners, something that's going to mean something for your listeners. And I thought there are so many people out there that need to hear this, because in any situation, if they had COVID, or if they have a surgery, or if there's some other kind of health concern, how many times do they just follow the orders or follow what the doctor says instead of like,
right,
wait, time
yeah,
out, what is best? And I've learned a lot about that with my son, Nathan. But just listening to you, it's so important that people understand that sometimes you can stop for a minute, think through things, and it's okay to ask questions. So I just
right.
really thought it was so important for you to share all of that.
Thank you. And to go back to when the doctors and nurses came in when I was first in the ICU, and I looked at the doctor and he just didn't seem confident to me. And I looked at his badge and he was an intern. So sure, he was a doctor, but he wasn't an experienced doctor. And I guess I've always been one to question authority. That's just part of my nature, because I'm not dumb. I read, I study, I need to know how things work. I need to know why things are the way they are. Just with the pandemic, I was paying attention to what was happening to people when they went in the hospital, because I was concerned. I cared. I was interested. Not because I thought, well, I'm going to end up there and I need to know this stuff. After I told the doctor, you're not putting me on a ventilator, I told him, I don't want to see you again. I don't want you on my care. And I never saw him again. 4 weeks in ICU, 2 weeks of not getting out of bed. I was obviously on the upswing at this point and needed to start physical therapy. Physical therapist would come to my room. And the very first thing that we did was simply swinging my legs off the edge of the bed, standing up with the support of a walker. And that was it, just to get out of bed. Um, the second day, getting out of bed, standing with a walker, and simply going from flat feet to my tiptoes. How many times could I do that before I just couldn't do it anymore? By the end of the week, my physical therapy was simply getting out of bed with a walker, walking around the end of the bed to the other side of the bed, sitting down to rest, and then walking back around to where I got out of the bed. And that was all I could do. So it was a slow process. I was still on oxygen. They kept trying to turn it down, and I would get lightheaded. They'd come in and turn it down when I was asleep, for the few naps that I did take. And I would wake up and I'd be like, something isn't right. I don't feel well again. I'm feeling worse than I did this morning. And eventually I figured out I would watch them if they were making an adjustment to it. And I would just adjust it myself, because I knew where I needed it for me to feel good. And I needed to be able to feel good to be able to do the physical therapy so that I could get out of there. I did what I felt I needed to do for me. Hadn't showered in 5 weeks, which is awful. The day I went into the hospital, I had my hair pulled up, on top of my head. And that was how it stayed the entire time. I mean, yeah, I redid it here and there, but I finally got a shower when I found out that I was going to be transferred to a rehab facility within a couple days. And when they finally got the official confirmation that I'd been accepted and they had space, I got to have a shower. But I couldn't even do that by myself. I had to have help, because I couldn't wash myself and hold on to the walker at the same time. To be standing up, I had to have the support of the walker. But it was wonderful to get a shower. Then transferred to the rehab facility, where I spent 2 weeks just doing physical therapy, occupational therapy, every day. They would come to my room with weights, a nice looking young man, to help me with the occupational therapy. But the first exercise was what they call sit to stand. So sitting in a chair and you stand up without using your arms to push on the chair or on your knees, or only with your leg and abdomen power. That, and doing some weights with your arms a little bit. But everything he asked me to do, if he asked me to do 10, I do 12. If he asked me to do 15, I'd do 17. I wanted to get better and I wanted to go home. They would have me go down to the physical therapy room, and they had some fake stairs that they had built, 4 or 5 steps. And I would have to go up and down those steps. And the first day I did it, one time up and down was all I could do. But the next day when I came back, he said, okay, let's do it again. I said, I'm doing it twice. He said, well, if you feel like you can, I said, I'm doing it twice. So again, with everything they asked me to do in terms of exercise, I would do more or faster or whatever I felt I needed to do to continue to improve.
And knowing you, that does not surprise me one bit at all. So, wow.
Yeah, I some people call me stubborn. I feel like I'm very determined.
That's a much better word. I like that.
um, so anyway, after 2 weeks in the rehab facility, I was still on oxygen. I was still on 6 liters of oxygen. They tried turning it down, and I would get dizzy, come close to passing out. My energy wouldn't last as long. So I kept turning it back up. And when they sent me home, I was still on oxygen. It was pretty much the moment when I walked in the house. I refused to let them wheel me all the way in. They wheeled me to the door, and I walked in, and it was like my brain shut off. That's when the long COVID started.
Right. I want to hear that important part of the story as well. But I just want to jump in and quickly remind people that really I wanted Laura to share a lot of that again, so that you remember how important it is to advocate for yourself and to ask the questions and to really think about what's best for you and listen to your body. Some people could have just continued on with, oh, it's the flu. I'll just keep on going. I don't need to go to the doctor. And around that time, people were nervous about going to see somebody or going
Right.
to the hospital because of the exposure. So I'm so grateful. I know your family is grateful that
Mhm.
you said, I need to take care of myself. I feel this way. So being stubborn or determined sometimes is very, very important. And I don't think a lot of us think that through. As I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking a lot about elderly people that maybe they're single, maybe they don't have anybody to help them and they don't know what's going on. It
Right.
just really brings that to mind that we need to support the people that we can. And if it's you by yourself, that you try whatever you can to just be your biggest advocate so that you don't get into
Right.
a very dangerous
And
situation.
the only person I trust 100% is my husband. Any other professional, whether it's a automotive mechanic or a doctor or whoever else, there's nothing wrong with asking why or what does that mean.
Right.
Even if
Right.
that's all you're comfortable asking, you need to have a good understanding of what they are advising you of.
Right. If you ask a question, it's not going to be the end of the world. So it's much more important to do that than to just accept what's happening.
I was raised to figure it out.
Mm.
Growing up on a farm, there's a lot of times that you just got to figure it out and make it happen. So yeah, I'm not afraid to ask questions. Everybody needs to be able to advocate for themselves, even if it's just as simple as I don't understand. Please explain again.
Exactly.
Don't
Right.
just blindly trust anybody.
Yes, yes, I couldn't agree
Yeah.
more. So I just wanted to reiterate that point. I want to continue to let you speak. Or there's something called long COVID, and I didn't really know too much about this until I spoke with Laura. So I want to hear that side, and then we'll go into what you've learned since then. But I'll let you start the story
Sure, sure.
with the long COVID.
So for me with long COVID, I mean, there's some very common symptoms with long COVID, but I think the list of symptoms is over 200. And it varies from person to person. So just like the symptoms of having COVID, my husband had COVID the same time I did, but he wasn't nearly as bad and he was able to convalesce at home. He had um, terrible headache and he had tummy troubles. I didn't have either of those. Mine was more flu-like congestion and respiratory. So, same thing with long COVID. A common factor is fatigue, just not having enough energy to do much of anything. Walking to the kitchen to get a glass of water is my activity for the morning because that's all I can do. And cognition is another big one. Although I'd heard of long COVID, at that point, people were just like, oh, you're just tired from being sick. But the cognition, I could hold a conversation and people wouldn't necessarily know, unless they knew me really well, that there was anything wrong. When I first got home from the hospital, I thought perfect time for me to read all these books that I want to read. I could read, but I couldn't tell you anything about what I had just read. My reading comprehension was pretty much zero. One thing that happened while I was convalescing at home after COVID, I'd gotten a new laptop. And you get a new laptop, you got to set it up, right? So you log onto the internet and you answer these questions, and it takes what, 20, maybe 30 minutes at the most. It took me 4 hours because I didn't understand the questions. I had to read each question over. I ended up in tears because I just didn't understand what they were asking me. And everything was like that. I did my physical therapy at home and I watched a lot of television. I watched shows that you didn't have to follow along necessarily. It was really hard. I was on oxygen for 4 months at home, 24 hours a day.
And how long would you say that these symptoms stayed with you?
I would say that I'm still not 100% to where I
Mhm.
was.
Mhm.
Um, I got off the oxygen completely after about 6 months, except if I was walking. And I started walking a little bit that summer. So we'd gotten me a portable oxygen machine that I would use if I would go out for a walk. I would always take it with me if I was going to the store. It took me a long time to be confident enough to be able to drive again because there's so much you have to pay attention to. And you don't realize it when you're
Mhm.
doing it, but to pay attention to how fast are you going? Am I staying in my lane? What are the other
Mhm.
cars doing around me?
Yeah,
What's
and
the
the reflexes.
Right. Yeah. And what's the path I need to take to get where I'm going? My husband actually hired somebody to stay with me at the house for the first 4 months because I couldn't be left alone. I couldn't start running a bath and walk away because I would forget. I couldn't start a pot of water boiling on the stove because I would forget. So just to have somebody there to make sure. And in our house, we're at a tri-level, so there's no bathroom on the main floor. So for me to go to the bathroom, it's a half flight of stairs, which doesn't sound like much. But by the time I would get to the top of the stairs, I would be so out of breath and my heart would be racing. I'd have to sit down and catch my breath before I could walk the 10 feet down the hallway to the bathroom.
That is unbelievable. Things that we take for granted that are just so easy to do, and you had all this difficulty doing it.
Yeah.
So, how many years ago was this?
Came home at the end of January 21. Could feel that I was getting better, getting better, getting better.
Mhm.
But we never knew where the plateau was going to be.
Right, right.
How much better am I going to get? I mean, at first it was, am I always going to be on oxygen? And then I was able to get off that. It still had some times where I was out of breath. There was one point pretty early on, I think I'd been home just about 2 months when I realized I was not taking deep breaths. It's because for a long time I couldn't. Like when I was in the ICU, I could breathe in for about 1 second. Then it felt like my lungs were full and I couldn't take in anymore. But at home, I realized I'm not breathing very deeply. Maybe that will help if I can practice some deep breathing. So I went to YouTube and I looked up deep breathing exercises. And so I started doing deep breathing exercises several times throughout the day. And that did help. It made a difference.
Yeah. You personally thinking what could help me instead of
Yeah.
somebody
Yeah.
telling you what to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's part of who I am in any situation. If things aren't going well, what do I need to do differently? What can I change? How can I influence this?
I think that is so important. This is what Tammy and I are trying to do with the show. When you're faced with a challenge, when you recognize that the path doesn't look the way that you thought it was going to look, what are you going to do about it? I think I said at the beginning, I love the phrase, everything is figure outable.
Right? Yeah.
And it's so true. And so I wanted to name the podcast that, but I know it's not my own coined phrase, so I didn't want to take
Yeah.
it.
No.
But yeah, everything is figure outable if you just take a minute and determine. And it might be different for you than it would be for somebody else.
Right.
And that reminds me too, as you're talking, I'm sure our listeners have had family or friends that had COVID and maybe had it closer to the way that you had it. My husband and I had it, but it was nowhere near what you went through. Did you find other people that you could relate to? Were there others out there that had similar issues that you could understand and finally understand that you're not alone?
Eventually, I found that community. I started with my doctor, and my primary care doctor, I am grateful for because she was willing to admit that we don't understand COVID. So she would really listen to me on what I was struggling with and what ideas I had and what I needed to do. And she referred me to various different specialists. I went to a heart doctor, I went to a lung doctor, I went to a neurologist. Now, all three of them told me there's nothing wrong. And so if I finally just gave up, I said, I'm not going to any more doctors. I'll continue to go to my primary care doctor, but I'm not going to any more specialists. They don't want to help me. So I just started doing more research on my own, and I found a Facebook group that was a long COVID Facebook group. And I finally felt like I wasn't crazy, like I wasn't making all this up, because there
Mhm.
were so many people out there that were experiencing what I was experiencing, and some worse, some with different symptoms than what I had. But with this Facebook group, people were sharing, what have they tried? What supplements have they tried? What exercises have they done? What kind of doctors have they seen? What questions are they asking? So being able to learn from other people's experience really helped me more than the specialist that I was going to.
Right. There's so much we don't know, and I think it takes a lot to be open, to say, "Wait a minute, I don't know everything. I need to open my eyes and allow other people to share their experiences and learn from it." So I appreciate that you had diligence like that and that you continue to try to understand and to also share what you've experienced and what you've
Right,
learned with
right,
others.
right. Yeah, so with just the way I am, I need to know how, why, what. And
Right.
so I do research, and I'll do that research wherever I can find helpful information. Um, and the reason I wanted to come on the podcast was to share my experience and hopefully make other people feel more comfortable with advocating for themselves, doing their own
Yes.
research, trying to understand and figuring it out.
Right.
Um,
What has going through all of this, I mean, you shared a little bit, but
yeah,
what has it taught you now that we're a few years out that you would like to
right.
share?
Well, let me just wrap up the COVID story with
Yes.
the fact that I was not able to go back to my job. I wasn't capable of doing that work. I started editing some documents for my husband for his company in the fall of 2021. It took me a lot longer than it ordinarily would have, but I really felt like it was good brain exercise for me to be reading and understanding and even making suggestions to improve how something is written. Something that I never thought that I would do, because I didn't feel like I was employable. I didn't feel like I would get through an interview and not seem like I couldn't think through things. So, my husband suggested that we start a second elevator company. And so that's what we did. A young woman that had worked for him was graduating in December with a degree in entrepreneurship. She and I met, hit it off, worked together a little bit at my husband's company, and we decided to start this business. And so we incorporated our woman-owned elevator company in January of 2022. I don't feel like I was still at my best at that point, but I was well enough that I could do some things, creating documents and creating letterhead and working on website content and that kind of thing. I wasn't as fast at it as I had been pre-COVID, but I was able to do it. And I've improved since then. I would say I'm probably 95% back to where I was. Um, and I don't say that anymore just because this is where I'm at.
Right.
I don't really like the phrase new normal. That's been so overused, but
Mhm.
I've accepted this is my new normal. And
Or this is
I,
your new path. This is the direction
right?
now.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. So that was definitely a pivot that I never expected. I didn't want to work for myself. So that was a huge pivot. I've had so many pivots in my life that I feel like I'm spinning. And I decided, okay, I'm a whirling dervish. And well, they're dancing. So this is just my dance. Life is a dance for me. And that's what I've decided. Yeah, I try not to wallow in pity for myself. Sometimes you have to do that, even if it's just for a minute. I've decided I'm dancing through life and I'm going to enjoy it.
I love that so much. That just puts a smile on my face because you can have pity for yourself. You can sit there and just wallow, like you said. You can be upset that everything looks different than you expected, or you can say, "You know what? I'm going to move forward and accept it and dance and get to a place where I'm happy and life is short." I'm very, very proud of you for overcoming as much as you did and being able to say all of that and have a smile on your face when you say it. That's pretty amazing to me.
Thank
And I'm
you.
also happy to that you and your husband did not let that difficult time end the beautiful story. I was really excited that you shared that story. If you didn't go to it, I would have gotten you there because
Yeah.
yes, I've heard it multiple times and I
Yeah.
just love it so much. And I'm very grateful that you two did not let that and then all of your health conditions come between such a
Right.
strong
Yep. Yep.
marriage.
He has been very supportive and understanding and helpful through my recovery for sure. And it's unfortunate that it took such a hard nudge from God to tell me that don't go,
Mhm.
you're supposed to stay.
Mhm.
But being stubborn, sometimes it takes a hard hit to catch on.
That's true. As you were telling that story and you said, "Oh, I was praying and I was looking for a sign," and then you got sick, immediately I'm like, "Well, I hope that wasn't the sign."
It,
But to
it,
your
I'm
point,
sure it was.
yeah, to
It
your point,
was. Yep.
you
Yep.
sometimes you need to get hit
Yep.
over the head.
Yep.
Sometimes God has subtle things that he shares and then you're not getting it. So he
Yep.
has to
Yep.
be
I don't
stronger.
always get subtle.
But I'm just so grateful, first of all, that you and I have maintained a friendship for all of these years, even if it's been quite some time between seeing one another. I'm also very grateful that you did explore the possibility of sharing your story on this podcast. Again, we're growing. This will be the 19th episode.
Wow.
We've shared quite a bit in a short period of time, but we just want to keep putting these messages together. And over time, we're going to have a lot of listeners and they're going to learn from everything that our interviewees are sharing and hopefully take some of those nuggets and improve things that happen in their life. And again, dance through the issues they have. So I will take one more minute to see if Tammy has anything she wants to add.
Um, I think the importance of us advocating and doing our own research for our own needs. I think especially like health and living a particular like healthy lifestyle. Like I've always tried to eat healthy and exercise and do all the right things. And there's so much in the world right now about all of that. And it's so important for us to make sure that we are doing our own research and identifying what's right for us. And the simplest thing of like, cooking for yourself and how to make good choices. But even if you have other health issues, and every doctor doesn't have every single answer, right? Not only just listening to what your doctor tells you, but to go further and do stuff on your own. I think a lot of people just take the expert's opinion and don't look around for other answers as well. And I think we as a society need to understand that and know that. And I think this is a really good story to help support that message there. So what you went through, Lora, was life changing, right? And so scary. And people go through those types of things in life. We also all have just day to day things that are smaller that impact us, but we all have some opportunity to take the reins and decide, how am I going to address this? You have to be your own advocate, which is what you said.
Well, my gosh, thank you so much for sharing all of that and all of the detail. I mean, so much of what you went through. I appreciate you going back and remembering all of that and bringing it all up so that people could learn from it. And I really appreciate you being a guest on our show. I know you weren't sure, but always a great speaker and a very good storyteller. So thank you so much for being on here with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad that I followed my heart and came and shared my story, and I hope that it will help somebody to advocate for themselves, to make some choices that are hard but need to be made, and to dance through life.
Yes, yes. I love that.
Love that. Love it.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Please continue to keep in touch and good luck with all of the endeavors and the business. I'm so happy to see you thriving and I see good things ahead for you for sure.
Right back at you, Andrea.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us for the Show Me the Way podcast. We truly appreciate you tuning in to today's episode about overcoming adversity and finding your path. We hope it brought you new insights, empowered you with perspective, and inspired you to find joy in your journey. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share it with someone who could use a little motivation. Until next time, keep seeking the light and showing the way.